Hello, welcome to Royal Black and Elite. I'm Lady TrenettWilson, your lecturer and social historian. I want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join me for today's lecture. I think you're going to find it interesting. One of the things that we know is in January, we set aside some time to celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King was one of the most preeminent civil rights leaders of our time. Most of us know his story and his sad passing when he was cut down on April the 4th, 1968, while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. Though most of us know about his storied life, the tragedy that befell his family is not often talked about, and many people do not even know that two of the most important people in his life passed away not long after he passed away. And so I wanted to talk about that. When we look at families and people who have lost many members in their family who were in the limelight, who were notable, and people knew them, most people think of JFK, John F. Kennedy. He lost his brother, the oldest one, in a plane crash. He lost another one shortly after he passed away. So there was a lot of unfortunate and untimely passing aways in his family. And so I thought, wow, when I found out and began to study history many years ago and found out what happened with Martin Luther King's family, I knew I wanted to bring it to the channel and bring it to you so you could know more about our history. Now, one of the reasons I'm going to also begin to bring more of these stories forward, at least once a week when I post, is because I want to honor these people's lives. A lot of times, all this stuff is hidden. We don't know about it. And so we don't even know what happened to a lot of our great civil rights leaders. And if we do know what happened to them, we don't know what happened to their family members. Oftentimes, their family members had to endure this journey, this battle that their children, their husband, their cousin, their uncle, whoever it was, or their brother was fighting. And we see this with Dr. Martin Luther King's family. So I want to start with his Dr. King's mother was named Alberta Christine Williams King, and she was born on September the 13th, 1904. Of course, his father was Martin Luther King Sr. They had three children. The oldest, Christine, was born in 1927. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in 1929, and Alfred, the youngest son, he was born in 1930. Now, First Lady King was the quintessential church mother. She was the choir director. She played the organ. If you know anything about church back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, for many, many years, you had a picture of what that church mother was, and that was First Lady Alberta King. So she was not only a mother who dedicated her life to her children, but she also founded the Ebenezer Choir in 1932. And she would go on to be the director of that choir until, like, for 30, 40 years. She did it for a very, very long time. But she was also educated. In 1938, she graduated from Morris Brown College. So she loved music. And in fact, it is said that Martin Luther King got his love for music from his mother. She was the Ebenezer Choir director for 25 years, only leaving for just a little while between 1960 and 1963 to help her son with his ministry, with his civil rights movement. So she would help with the children, babysit, things like that. But she returned to the choir after 63, and in 1972, she retired altogether. However, she did continue to play the piano for the church. Now, Mrs. King's life was filled with service, including being the organist for the Women's Auxiliary of the National Baptist Convention. If you know, you know. She was a member of the YWCA and the NAACP. She was truly a light to the community and to her family. And I think that's why this is just so tragic because she lost Martin Luther King on April the 4th, 1968. And only a year later, she lost her youngest son, Alfred Daniel Williams King. Now, this is where some of the conspiracy theories begin to come in because how do you lose Martin Luther King one year and then the very next year you lose the brother? He was found unalived in his pool. And so let's get into his story a little bit before we tie up First Lady Alberta's story. Alfred was born on July the 30th, 1930, and so he was the youngest of the three King children. He became a father at a young age, but he was dedicated to his family. He married Naomi Ruth Barber, who he stayed married to until his untimely passing. And he graduated from Morehouse College in 1959. We know that Dr. King graduated from there as well. He became the pastor of the Mount Vernon First Baptist Church in Newman, Georgia. Now, Alfred was very active in the civil rights movement along with his brother. He helped his brother. I mean, he was arrested in October 1960, right along with Dr. Martin Luther King at a lunch counter sit-in in Atlanta. On May the 11th, 1963, his home was kaboomed, and he dealt with that by dealing with it with nonviolence. You see, he and his brother believed in nonviolence. So, though he was not in the spotlight, he was his brother's backbone. He went with him everywhere he went. Alfred was at the Selma demonstration and he participated in the Poor People's Campaign. He traveled extensively with Dr. King, and unfortunately, he was with him when he was cut down in Memphis. It is reported that he was in the room right under Dr. King. And when he heard the fire, he went up as fast as he could and he saw his brother laying there. They say he just lost it. It took several men to hold him back, as I know it would all of us to see our loved one like that. Unfortunately, after his passing, it's reported that he began drinking very heavily. I mean, the entire world was mourning, so I know his brother was mourning. He tried to keep working in the civil rights movement. In fact, some of his work was included in the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and he was installed as the co-pastor at Ebenezer after Dr. King's passing. But on July the 21st, 1969, Alfred Daniel, they called him AD, was found unalive floating in his pool. Now, the cause of passing was listed as accidental drowning, but his wife reportedly pointed to a history of heart problems within the family, pointing to Alfred Jr. passing at a very young age while jogging. Darlene, their younger daughter, was 20 years old when she passed away in 1976. Vernon, who passed away in 2009, and even Martin Luther King Sr., who passed away of a heart attack in 1984. So she felt like he may have had heart problems that had been exacerbated by his brother's passing and the pressure the system was putting on their family. She said they unalived her Boaz. Two of First Lady Alberta's sons are gone now. And on June the 30th, 1974, while she sat at the organ playing for the church, as she had done so many years in the past and had continued to do up until that day when a man came in there in the church named Marcus Wayne Chenault. He was a 23-year-old black man and he pow-powed her in the head. As First Lady Alberta sat at the organ in Ebenezer Baptist Church getting ready to play the Lord's Prayer, a man out of nowhere stood up and he shouted, "You are serving a false God." And he began to fire. Unfortunately, First Lady was struck along with a deacon and another gentleman. The man's name was Marcus Wayne Chenault. He was 23 years old, and some question if he had been radicalized. You see, his mentor was a Hebrew Israelite named Hananiah E. Israel, and they believed all Christians were their enemies. Further, Marcus believed that all black preachers were a menace to black people. So he was supposed to go and unalive Jesse Jackson, but instead he unalived First Lady Alberta. He was mortally wounded. By the time they made it to the hospital, soon after she passed. Chenault was convicted of first-degree unaliving, and he was sentenced to be unalived. But his sentence was later resentenced, and so he was sentenced to life. On August 3rd, 1995, Chenault, at 49 years old, suffered a major stroke while he was behind bars. By August the 19th, he had passed away. Now, there's many people who do not believe his story about how it all came to be and why he came there and did what he did to First Lady. Some believe that what happened to his brother was also not an accident. We perhaps will never know, but I at least wanted you to know about these great people and the lives that they lived behind the scenes to help Dr. Martin Luther King reach the goals that he set in the pinnacle of the civil rights movement that he reached. First Lady Alberta was buried first, and her husband followed her 10 years later after he suffered a heart attack, and they were interred together. Now, I'm not going to even say I hope that you enjoyed this story, this lecture, but what I am going to say is I hope you learned a lot from it. I want to thank you for joining me. And as you always know, my lectures are for educational and entertainment purposes, and my main source was Wikipedia. I thank you again for taking some time out to share another great episode of Royal Black and Elite.